To Joe's Astrology. This is the astrology of Jeffrey Epstein. And if you're new here, just a reminder, I have many other readings on my YouTube, Joe's Astrology, and I also have a Patreon, which I'll link down in the description, that is going to have in-depth readings of most, if not all, of the charts that I've read, including this one on Jeffrey Epstein. And we see here he is a Sagittarius rising, Moon in Aries in the 4th, and Sun in Aquarius at 0 degrees in the 2nd. And most notably, the ruler of his rising, you could say the ruler of his chart, is Jupiter in the 6th in Taurus. So I want to start there. Often we see with a Sagittarius rising, we could see, because Jupiter rules it, we see someone who is a teacher, someone who's involved in finances, a financier, because Sagittarius is the sign of the financier. And here we see Jeffrey Epstein has the Sagittarius rising, and the ruler is here. In this chart, it's actually in the 5th. It's close to the 6th. Let's just say it's here in the 5th. And I did read he was a teacher, and then he was involved in banking and maybe a financial consultant and all things involving finance, which I'm not going to get into details in this reading. So we have here, and it's in the 5th house of speculation. And the 5th house is very important for this chart because we can see that the things that he's involved in with banking and being in the financial industry were of a speculative nature. And we see Jupiter, the ruler of the chart, in the 5th house of speculation. He was also accused of being a sex offender, and we see the 5th house is also the house of children. And I did read that at least from what I read on Wikipedia, the ages were around 14, or averaging, or somewhere around 14 years old. So I would still consider that to correlate with the house of children. And it's in the sign of Taurus, so we could see this idea of speculation in order to make more money and acquire resources, Taurus. 5th house is also the house of sex. That's what I was thinking. This idea of being a sex offender. We have the house of pleasure, and also could be the house of children. And this man has combined the two, and we see that there with the Jupiter in the 5th house. And we're going to look a little bit more and see what else we can dig up here. So he also has the 8th house, the house of sex, making a sextile to Uranus. The Uranus in the 8th house making a sextile to Jupiter that I just described. And with Uranus in the 8th, you could have odd or unusual sexual experiences, or you could equate it to being a sexual offender, because sexual offenders usually have they have odd or what is considered criminal, could be considered criminal, or unusual sexual preferences. And we see that here with Uranus in the 8th. Now, this stuff, just a reminder, this does not mean if you have these things that you are a Jeffrey Epstein. It does not mean that at all. That's not how astrology works, and that's not how I do astrology here. That's why I like to learn about a person and correlate it to the chart rather than try and guess based on the symbols, because that is still very difficult, even if you're a really good astrologer. Because again, a lot of this could be, this Uranus here could be something like being a porn star, or anything that would be taboo to society. It's not necessarily criminal. So we have that. I want to point that out as well. And we see that his sun is also in Aquarius, and his north node is in Aquarius. So now we're beginning to just add up the pieces. And his Uranus is making an inconjunct to the north node, almost exactly. course, Uranus is ruled by Aquarius. He has Pluto in Leo, and the South Node is in Leo, conjunct Pluto in the ninth. So that would, so we see with the South Node there and Pluto there in the ninth, he's coming from a place of being a finance person, being a learner, a teacher, with Pluto and the South Node in the ninth house of teaching. But here's the thing with the combination of Leo. Again, we see that idea of sex and pleasure being combined with being a teacher, because that's probably where all this started. Him being a teacher of teenagers in schools for a while. I'm not sure if there was anything there as far as like illegal activity. But with this combination of Leo, we can often see a teacher, so we see teachers that aren't really purely into the philosophy, into the idea of teaching, but they just want to be on stage. They just want to be a presenter. And there's all different levels of this. I'm sure if you've had teachers, you've seen this. They're not the greatest teachers. They maybe just follow the program, and if they have a lot of Leo in their chart, they could just primarily be there because they like to be in front of people. So we see Pluto in the South Node, where he's coming from here in the ninth. So definitely someone who would have skills in finance, in the finance department as well. His moon is in Aries, and that is ruled by Mars, and it is in the fourth, and it's conjunct. Is Mars that's ruling that is conjunct Venus here in the third, in Pisces. So the guy here with the moon, with that combination of the moon in fourth and in Aries, probably is a guy who is a go-getter, someone who can go be assertive, be aggressive, someone to go after what he wants. And with that moon in the fourth, definitely can deceive people as being a caretaker. I mean, he may even have been perceived as being a caring person from amongst the people that he was involved with. So you can see that kind of conflicting energy where a person might not realize what his motives are, because he may come across as such a nice guy or a caring, nurturing guy with that moon in the fourth. And we see the ruler is with Venus. So he's definitely a guy with a lot of passion. We see that with the Mars-Venus conjunction. And it's on the fourth house cusp. We could say Mars there in the fourth house cusp isn't the best place to have Mars. And it's in the decan of Cancer, which would also be in its fall. It's making a trine to that Uranus in the eighth, and specifically it's in the third. So if we look at the trine with Uranus in the third, the third house and Gemini can be a trickster. So, with that Gemini Mars, people may not have been able to see him for who he was. He's probably very good at disguising himself, disguising his motives, and may have been so likable that people would just oversee anything that they would just overlook anything that they didn't like. Let me see here the North Node being ruled by Uranus, where he's headed with the Sun there, moving towards that North Node. You can see as the life went on, he became more famous and more popular, and we could see that the North Node being ruled by Uranus, where he's headed, is also ruled by this. Ruled by this Uranus comes back to this eighth house, and I wanted to point that out because there's a lot of strong pull to everything that I said, and then in the end, when he committed suicide in prison, we think of a Uranus in the eighth house in Cancer in the Scorpio decan of somebody who had that sudden change, that calamity, or committing suicide at the end there. And even with Mars making contact, even though it's a trine, that can give more indication of that quick death. Let's see here, let's take a look at Saturn. Saturn and Neptune. Saturn is in Libra, where it likes to be, though it's in the more Gemini. It's in that Gemini decan. You can even see here the Gemini ruling the seventh. Mercury comes back to Mercury in the second. The people that he would relate to could be considered as con artists, and con artists who are trying to procure money with Mercury there in the second in Capricorn. One last thing, I just want to see if there's any more indication of suicide. Take a look. We can take a look at the transits. I believe that when he did commit suicide, he would have had this Pluto transiting his Mercury. And I also know somebody. I know of someone else I can think of who also committed suicide during a Pluto Mercury transit. Again, not to say I went through a Pluto Mercury transit. It was bad, and I will say it possibly could have correlated to something that dark. But yeah, so definitely that transit was going on with that Mercury. I'm not going to look at the other transits. I might look at them on my Patreon when I do an in-depth reading. But this is Jeffrey Epstein. I hope you enjoyed this mini reading, and hope you have a great day.